Our third presenter is Molly Tyson, a graduate of Colorado College and Yale University, whose work focuses on health, conservation, and recreation. Molly's presentation is titled Leaving Yellowstone for Yale, Searching for Sense of Place Along the 43rd Parallel. So take it away, Molly. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Let me, trying to get my screen right for you guys. Okay. And share my screen. Okay, can you guys all see that?
Yes, we can see it.
I tried to make it. There we go. Okay, great. So where are you from? It's a common question. After all, place is integral to who we are. But the question I'm more interested in underlies that. What does your place mean to you? And the question that fascinates, nearly agitates me, is what length would you go to protect this place, even if it meant setting limits on a personal passion? I moved around growing up a lot, so the question of where are you from always made me a little bit uncomfortable. But after 20 years, I've finally become feeling all right saying I'm from the Tetons in the greater Yellowstone. While a recent transplant by many standards, it's the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I started out as a waitress, an outdoor educator, transitioned into mountain guiding, and most recently was a climbing ranger for the Park Service. Time, life events, and these professional roles have changed my relationship with this place. Looking through the 22-year-old eyes I arrived with, I could have never anticipated the depth of love I could have for a place, how that love has saved me, and the fear of that love's inadequacy to protect it. Sense of place is relatively well developed in the greater Yellowstone. The mountains are regularly referred to as cathedrals, the backcountry as a church. Some say the Teton Mountains are a powerful energy vortex, and multiple Native American tribes still rely on the land for subsistence and spiritual sustenance. Mormons arrived in wagons, settling the valleys with their wards. Skiing, snow machining, mountain biking, hunting, these ways of being in our place are regularly referred to as religion. But like everyone, we're struggling through these current crises, and despite it all, creating more crises as how to revere and care for what so many of us deem as sacred. If this is the case in a place unique enough to still have grizzlies, wolves, elk, avalanches, fire, and hillsides of wildflowers as part of our everyday existence, then how are these questions being asked in the rest of the country? With latitude as a driver of an ecosystem's trait, a key factor in the shaping of what makes the greater Yellowstone so special to me, I decided to head across the country's 43rd parallel, which is the location of my home in Idaho, to see what people along the way had to say about their place. Not people who'd chosen professions that tie them to the non-human world like I had, but other stakeholders in our country's public land, the greater Yellowstone included. These writings are some of what I learned, observed, and listened to along the way as I made my way east to start my graduate program at Yale in the fall of 2018. Buffalo Valley, Wyoming. It was a modern day Travels with Charlie, but with an all-wheel drive van, a hound dog named Otis instead of a poodle, and the benefit of a human co-pilot, a wildland fire captain named Tom. Of course, driving in a straight line across the United States is not possible. There are significant obstacles along the way, like 3 of the 5 Great Lakes, but we are game to try. As we wound our way out of the Tetons and through the Buffalo Fork Valley, we started talking about last summer's grizzly maulings. I thought of other tragedies and close calls as we continued up the pass. The essay written by anthropologist Keith Bassow about what Western Apache came to mind. where the land serves as a constant reminder of moral lessons. Wrong someone in the community? Well, don't be surprised if an elder takes you on a walk, points out a particular landscape feature, and then tells an associated story. The story will feature a character that also erred in a similar way and was taught a valuable life lesson from the experience. Because of these moral lessons of character, wisdom is considered attached to the land, and the land serves as a constant reminder for proper moral conduct every time the offender passes that way. Western Apache Dudley Patterson described it like this: wisdom sits in places. It's like the water that never dries up. You need to drink water to stay alive, don't you? Well, you also need to drink from places. You must remember everything about them. You must learn their names. You must keep remembering what happened at them long ago. There's no shortage of stories about places in the Tetons. Looking out the rearview mirror, I could point to where an ill-prepared soloist got stuck on Mount Moran, different places where friends and acquaintances died, where the rock changes from gneiss to diabase, becoming crumbly and dangerous for climbing. And right here, grizzly bears. I'd say most of the stories that stick with us, myself included, are relevant to safety, survival, and resilience in the mountains during moments of crisis, but in a very practical sense. Instead, how would our relationship to these slide paths, rocks faces, and thick woods change if we actively made the connection to how even deeper vital life lessons are also supported by place? It necessitates a new kind of narrative, a kind of storytelling that I believe creates gratitude, devotion, and love deeper than just excitement over a few fresh feet of new powder snow, the perfect kind for skiing. Now, don't get me wrong, that makes me excited too. But I think there's room for more thoroughly understanding and expanding the depth of what is meaningful in this place, as it obviously holds meaning for so many. Stories are, and always have been, aware that we share this. Tomah, Wisconsin is not a destination hotspot unless your Chevy van has a severely torqued tie rod or you're an indoor water park connoisseur. While waiting out the weekend for a repair shop to open, Winter Storm Bruce bore down on the region. In a Starbucks, I meet Emily, a nurse from Milwaukee, and her 4-year-old, where we talked about Midwest fishing, boating, and camping. I think for the typical person, it's hard in the struggle of daily life to think about nature. The gap is getting bigger. There's health and education disparities and income inequalities. If you're fighting to have enough in your paycheck, you're not going to be thinking about Zion National Park's waterways. Emily's thoughts indicated a separation I heard over and over again on the road. The majority of people I spoke with saw connection to place simply about recreation, an activity that often they couldn't access from time, money, culture, or energy standpoint. It wasn't about a reliance on clear water, fresh air, or the way the land teaches values that are at the core of a strong society, the sacred and the spiritual. Sense of place was a luxury that they couldn't afford. A feeling of accomplishment or relief, I'm not sure which, mounted as we neared Castle Point on New Hampshire's coastline. The East Coast version of Alpenglow was hitting the water, and I snapped pictures through the chain link fence protecting the Coast Guard building on the other side from people like me. I'm only half joking because I would have loved to ask those serving about their sense of place, and if protecting this country, this place, is ever seen as protecting the black-footed ferret in Wyoming, the water quality of the Missouri River, or the sweetgrass that is still used for braiding. The expedition was over, but not the drive. Just a shade south of the 43rd parallel, my mom and my other dog, Callie, were waiting with pecan and pumpkin pies. We sat in our kitchen telling stories, trying to share the vastness of what we'd seen and heard. The best of trips, the best of stories just ignite more curiosity. So of course, I was left with more questions. But for now, let me go back to those initial ones. Where are you from? What is your connection to your place? And how are you willing to protect your place, the place that sustains you, even if it means putting limits on your passion? As Tom and I made our way across the country, lettuce was taken off the menu for an E. coli outbreak. Winter Storm Bruce canceled thousands of flights, closed major highways. An article popped up on my newsfeed that the zoonotic disease, chronic wasting disease, arrived in Grand Teton National Park. Thousands of migrants arrived at the southern border seeking refuge in a paradigm shift that attributed their exodus in part to climate change. These are all stories about place and what sustains our bodies, hearts, and minds, even if we don't see them as such. These stories and the ways they can and will irrevocably change the greater Yellowstone are the future. Existence, not to mention coexistence, is going to get harder to tackle, not easier. So when you find the right words to convey your sense of meaning, connection, and responsibility for the sacredness of your own place, the non-human world in all of its forms, then please share your stories and help others find ways to tell theirs. Our future depends on it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm wondering if there are any questions from the group, the chat, or from the group, because I know we have about 7 minutes left, and I wanted to give priority to any of your questions if you have them. Also, I can't see everyone on the screen, so if you have a question, you can just jump in. I can ask, oh, David, did you want to go?
I did.
Yes.
Molly, may I please ask you a question not directly relevant to your rap?
Yeah.
Being familiar as you are with the greater Yellowstone area and Teton, two of the most magnificent places in America, obviously, what are your concerns about how populated it's getting with the overwhelming run of quite innocent, well-intended tourists such as I, who want to enjoy these treasures? And I know it's becoming quite dense. Not terribly articulate, but I think you get my point.
No, I know exactly what you're getting at. And we've seen it all the more with COVID. Real estate has just gone through the roof, creating its own sort of cascade of socioeconomic issues for people that live here and are serving, trying to live and work here. But in the more, I think there's and this is something that people in environmental land management wrestle with all the time, that balance between the truth in most people needing to interact with a certain level of non-developed world and place in order to develop a connection, though not always. You think about the number of people like PhD candidate at Yale, Gao Yongfeng, who has run a nonprofit for years on the snow leopard. He's never seen a snow leopard. There are a lot of people like that, care about Antarctica, have never been to Antarctica, but nonetheless, there has to be that sort of, there typically has to be that fostering, which most easily comes through direct experience, thus spending time in places where non-built features dominate. So it really is, so I think most people recognize that, but then where is the balance? And this particularly was a relevant, I'm sorry, Otis the hound dog's trying to participate.
Otis.
It's a hard question, and by and large, there is sort of a mixed blessing in that many people don't actually go, they congregate often in the same areas. So there is a tremendous amount of space out there that is, relatively untouched by crowds. But I think it comes back to sort of threefold. The deepest being all institutions working really hard to create a new foundational understanding of our of humans' relationship to non-built, non-human species places. And then on the more practical level, adequate funding for protecting and educating these places. And the third being education, not necessarily just education on the ground through the naturalist tour that you might do when you arrive somewhere, but also education constantly being integrated into every level of school, no matter where someone lives. And those being rooted in ethics, environmental ethics, which really I would argue need to stretch into every institution, because we wouldn't exist without this environment that we have. So I don't know if that helps a little bit.
No, it helps a lot, and I thank you. But may I ask you one real quick follow-up?
Yeah.
Because it touches so much on so many things you just said. Have you yet read Justin Farrell's new book about Jackson
I
Hole?
haven't. It's on my shelf. I have
Quite
yet to read it.
interesting.
Yeah.
Justin's a trip anyway.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Molly.
No, thank you, David. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly, for your presentation, and David for that rich question. We have 2 more minutes left, and does anyone else have a short question? Or we could just leave it at that. Looking through. I guess I'm wondering if you could speak to the power, and I think you did this a little bit, and let me ask this really quickly, the intergenerational kind of power of storytelling, especially when we call multiple places homes or when we don't have a place to call home.
Oh, I think that's I think that's such an important one, and something that resonates with me as having moved around so much growing up, and even still now being in a phase of life where I am having to move around again. What was, and this was what I presented today was a smaller portion of a much bigger project that I wrote about. What was interesting in talking to people, I really took sort of a every person on the street attitude towards interviewing people and talking to them about place. Most people did not respond to the question, and they really did not understand what I meant, and I would sort of have to tease out of them. And by and large, very quickly, when they would talk about what was important to them about place, it would be community. And community, I think that gives us an opportunity to dive deeper into, yes, community is into not just the physical people that you can move around, but then how are people's identities, ways of showing up in the world, shaped by the place that they're in and the place that they're choosing to be present in. So I think it's taking, I mean, it's just like wildlife, for the birds that inhabit a place for you, or the amphibians, it's the humans, the friends. But we've sort of lost that language and that quality of conversation that brings us back to the non-human aspects of place. And I think it's just a matter of us needing to integrate those aspects of conversation into more conversations, and recognizing that how place shapes us, which isn't just a religion or ecology, evolutionary biology thing. I mean, that's social work, in essence. That's psychology. I mean, everything